I'm about to bust one of the most common myths I hear from diabetic patients almost every single week. And honestly, it's costing people years of good nutrition out of fear. Have you ever been told that if you have diabetes or prediabetes, you need to avoid fruit because it's full of sugar and will spike your blood sugar dangerously? Well, that's not accurate. Cutting fruit out of your diet is not going to protect you the way you think it will. In fact, for most people with diabetes, eliminating fruit entirely can actually make your blood sugar control worse, not better. I'm Dr. Will Graham, and after 23 years treating patients with type 2 diabetes, I want to walk you through exactly what's true here, because the real science is far more useful than the blanket fear most people have been given. Number 1. Let's talk about where this myth comes from, because, like most health myths, there's a kernel of truth buried inside it. Fruit does contain natural sugar, fructose and glucose, and yes, eating any carbohydrate, including fruit, will raise your blood sugar to some degree. That part is biologically accurate. When glucose enters your bloodstream from any source, your pancreas releases insulin to help move that glucose into your cells. For someone with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, that system doesn't work as efficiently, so blood sugar can rise higher and stay elevated longer than it would in someone without diabetes. That's real. That's measurable. And it's exactly why people got scared and started cutting fruit entirely. But here's what gets lost in that fear. Not all sugar sources behave the same way inside your body, and treating an apple the same way you treat a can of soda or a candy bar is a fundamental misunderstanding of how digestion and blood sugar actually work. Here's the mechanism that matters. When you eat a whole fruit, an apple, a pear, an orange, a handful of berries, you're not just consuming sugar, you're consuming sugar wrapped inside dietary fiber, specifically a type called soluble fiber, along with water, polyphenols, and a complex cellular structure that your digestive system has to physically break down. That fiber matrix dramatically slows the rate at which sugar is released into your bloodstream. This is measured using something called the glycemic index, which ranks how quickly a food raises blood sugar, and the glycemic load, which accounts for both speed and quantity. A medium apple, for example, has a glycemic index around 36, which is considered low. Compare that to a glass of apple juice. Same fruit, same sugar, but with the fiber stripped out and the cellular structure destroyed, and the glycemic index jumps dramatically higher, often into the 40s or 50s, with a much faster, sharper blood sugar spike. Same fruit, completely different metabolic effect. This is the single most important distinction diabetic patients need to understand, and it's the one almost nobody explains clearly. There's a second mechanism that matters just as much. The soluble fiber in whole fruit doesn't just slow sugar absorption in that one meal. It actively improves insulin sensitivity over time when eaten consistently. Soluble fiber feeds beneficial gut bacteria, which produce short-chain fatty acids during fermentation. These compounds have been shown in clinical research to improve how responsive your cells are to insulin, meaning your body needs less insulin to manage the same amount of glucose. So paradoxically, regularly eating whole fruit can improve your long-term blood sugar control, even though it causes a small, manageable rise in glucose in the moment it's eaten. By the way, if you're finding this kind of clear, evidence-based breakdown helpful, go ahead and subscribe, because this channel exists specifically to give you the real science behind diabetes management, not fear-based blanket rules. Now, let's look at the actual clinical data, because this is where the myth really falls apart. A large meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal, pooling data across multiple long-term cohort studies involving hundreds of thousands of participants, found that higher whole fruit consumption was associated with a measurably lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes in the first place, not a higher risk. The researchers specifically noted that this protective association did not extend to fruit juice, which behaves metabolically more like a sugary drink due to the missing fiber. A separate study published in PLOS Medicine, following over 500,000 adults across China, found that individuals with diabetes who ate fresh fruit regularly had a 17% lower risk of all-cause mortality and a 13 to 28% lower risk of diabetes-related complications, including cardiovascular disease and microvascular damage to the eyes and kidneys, compared to diabetic patients who rarely or never ate fruit. Let that sink in. Diabetics who ate more fruit had fewer complications, not more. Let's go through specific examples, because I think real numbers help more than general statements. Berries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries are consistently among the best choices for diabetics. A cup of blueberries contains about 15 grams of sugar, but also close to 4 grams of fiber and a dense concentration of anthocyanins, a polyphenol shown in clinical trials to improve insulin sensitivity directly. Studies have found that regular berry consumption in people with type 2 diabetes improved post-meal blood sugar response measurably compared to a refined carbohydrate control snack with the same calorie count. Apples and pears, both around 18 to 20 grams of sugar per medium fruit, consistently show low glycemic index values because of their high pectin fiber content. Citrus fruits, oranges, grapefruit combine moderate sugar with high vitamin C and flavonoids that have been linked in research to modest improvements in arterial function, which matters enormously for diabetics since cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in this population. Even bananas, which get an unfairly bad reputation, have a moderate glycemic index, and a slightly underripe banana actually contains resistant starch, a type of fiber that doesn't spike blood sugar at all and instead feeds beneficial gut bacteria. What does matter, and where the real nuance lives, is portion size and pairing. A diabetic patient eating an entire bowl of grapes or a large platter of mango in one sitting is going to see a bigger glucose rise than someone eating a measured half-cup serving. Pairing fruit with a source of protein or healthy fat, a handful of almonds with an apple, Greek yogurt with berries, slows gastric emptying even further and blunts the blood sugar response significantly. This is basic, practical nutrition science, not fear-based elimination. So what actually drives poor blood sugar control in diabetics if it's not fruit? Three things matter far more. Number 1, overall refined carbohydrate and added sugar intake from processed foods, white bread, pastries, sugary drinks, candy. These have none of the fiber or polyphenol protection fruit offers. Number 2, physical inactivity, which directly worsens insulin resistance regardless of diet. Number 3, visceral fat and overall body composition, which independently drives insulin resistance through chronic low-grade inflammation. Fruit, eaten whole and in reasonable portions, is simply not a major driver of poor diabetes outcomes. The research is remarkably consistent on this. So let's return to the original question. Should people with diabetes avoid fruit because it's full of sugar? The answer is no. Whole fruit, eaten in sensible portions, is not the enemy your fear has made it out to be. It's the opposite. The fiber, water content, and polyphenols in whole fruit slow sugar absorption, improve long-term insulin sensitivity, and have been consistently linked in large population studies to better outcomes for people with diabetes, not worse ones. What actually matters is choosing whole fruit over fruit juice, watching portion sizes, pairing fruit with protein or fat when possible, and focusing your real attention on processed sugar, inactivity, and overall body composition, because those are the factors the evidence says truly drive blood sugar control. If you found this useful and want more myths broken down using actual clinical and population research instead of fear-based rules, subscribe to this channel because that's exactly what we do here, taking confusing health claims and giving you the real science behind them. I'll see you in the next one.